Welcome to this explainer. If you are studying for your Class 10 science exams and staring down Chapter 5, wondering how on earth you are going to remember all these complex biological systems, hey, take a deep breath. You are in exactly the right place. Today, we are doing a complete, ground-up, whiteboard-style masterclass on life processes. We are going to break down the textbook, decode those activities, and turn all that dense information into a clear, fascinating story. So grab your notebooks, get comfortable, and let's dive right into it.
All right, here is our roadmap for today. We are looking at the ultimate maintenance job: nutrition to source our fuel, respiration to unlock the energy, transportation as the delivery system, excretion as the cleanup crew, and finally, a quick check of your understanding. Let's get going.
Section 1. The ultimate maintenance job.
To really wrap our heads around this chapter, I want you to think of a living organism as a highly advanced, incredibly complex factory. And, just like any factory, if you leave it alone, things start breaking down. Our environment is constantly trying to wear us down. If our highly ordered biological structure falls apart, well, the organism is no longer alive, right? So living creatures absolutely must continuously repair and maintain their structures. This is exactly where life processes come in. These are the fundamental maintenance functions that literally have to go on 24/7. Even when you are just sitting there in class or fast asleep in bed, this maintenance job has to keep going. Your body is moving molecules around every single second just to keep you alive.
Now, here is a fundamental reality of physics and biology. You cannot do work without energy. Since this constant, non-stop molecular maintenance is actively preventing damage and breakdown, where does the energy to run this factory actually come from? Well, it has to come from outside the organism's body.
Which brings us to Section 2, nutrition. Sourcing the fuel.
To keep our biological factory running, we've got to bring raw carbon-based fuel in from the outside world. This process of transferring an energy source from the outside to the inside, that is what we call nutrition. Now notice how the biological world is basically divided into two types of factories based on how they get this fuel. On one side, we have got autotrophic nutrition. Think of green plants and some bacteria. They take incredibly simple, inorganic stuff from their environment, just carbon dioxide and water, and by using sunlight, they manufacture their own complex carbohydrates. It is amazing. On the flip side, we have heterotrophic nutrition. That is us, humans, animals, fungi. We rely entirely on the heavy lifting that has already been done by those autotrophs. We consume those complex substances, but here is the catch. Our bodies cannot use them directly. We have to use biocatalysts called enzymes to break these complex foods down into simpler, usable forms.
Let's actually zoom in on the autotrophs for a second, because their process, photosynthesis, is literally the foundation of almost all life on Earth. Take a look at this leaf cross-section. The plant takes in water from the soil and carbon dioxide from the air through these tiny little pores called stomata. Inside the leaf, green pigments, you know them as chlorophyll, absorb light energy from the sun. This light energy is then used to split water into hydrogen and oxygen, and ultimately reduce carbon dioxide into carbohydrates. These carbohydrates provide the plant with energy, and any extra is stored up as starch. Think of starch as their internal energy reserve.
But hey, how do we know for absolutely sure that chlorophyll and sunlight are essential for this? Well, Activity 5.1 in your textbook is basically a detective experiment. We take a potted plant with variegated leaves, leaves that are partly green and partly white, kind of like a money plant. First, we lock it in a dark room for 3 days. Why? To make sure the plant uses up all its stored starch. Then, we put it out in bright sunlight for a few hours. When we pluck a leaf, boil it in alcohol to strip away the green color, and dip it in iodine, guess what happens? Only the parts that were originally green turn a deep blue-black. This brilliantly proves that only the areas with chlorophyll that were exposed to sunlight could actually perform photosynthesis and create that starch.
So whether you made the food yourself, like a plant, or ate it like an animal, the fuel is now successfully inside the factory. But a lump of coal isn't energy until you burn it, right? So how do our cells actually unlock the hidden energy trapped inside these food molecules?
Section 3. Respiration. Unlocking the energy.
Respiration is basically the chemical processing plant of your body. It is the process of acquiring oxygen from outside the body and using it to break down food sources through oxidation reduction reactions. Let's trace this critical pathway step by step. Now, no matter what organism we're talking about, the very first step of respiration always happens in the cytoplasm.
Right there, a 6-carbon glucose molecule is broken down into a 3-carbon molecule called pyruvate. From there, the pathway splits depending on whether oxygen is around. If oxygen is present, we go down the aerobic pathway into the mitochondria, breaking that pyruvate down completely into carbon dioxide, water, and a massive, massive amount of energy.
Let's clearly contrast these pathways. Aerobic respiration happens in the mitochondria, uses oxygen, and gives us a huge energy payoff. But what if there is no air? Well, yeast, for example, undergoes anaerobic respiration during fermentation, turning pyruvate into ethanol and carbon dioxide without any oxygen. And what about us? Have you ever run a really fast sprint and gotten those terrible muscle cramps? That happens when there is a sudden lack of oxygen in your muscle cells. Your cells urgently need energy, so they switch to an anaerobic pathway, converting pyruvate into lactic acid. That buildup of lactic acid is exactly what causes those painful cramps. Ouch!
Now, all this energy released during respiration doesn't just float around uselessly. It is immediately used to synthesize a molecule called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. The textbook uses a brilliant analogy here, comparing ATP to a rechargeable battery for your cells. It is the energy currency. When your cell needs to do work, like contracting a muscle or firing a nerve impulse, it breaks the terminal phosphate linkage in an ATP molecule using water. This releases a very precise, fixed amount of energy, exactly 30.5 kilojoules per mole, every single time.
Moving on to Section 4, Transportation, the delivery system.
All right, so the factory has food, and it has a way to extract energy from it using oxygen. But in a massive multicellular organism like a human, simple diffusion just isn't going to cut it. To move things around, the distances are way too great. We need an internal logistics network, and ours is built around a fluid connective tissue, blood. Blood has a fluid medium called plasma, which handles all the dissolved goods. It transports food, carbon dioxide, and nitrogenous wastes. Suspended right there in this plasma are the red blood corpuscles, and they have the highly specialized job of carrying oxygen. But fluid sitting in tubes doesn't move on its own. We desperately need a powerful pumping organ to push this blood around the entire body and ensure the network reaches every single tissue.
Enter the human heart. This muscular organ, which is about the size of your fist, is essentially a high-security traffic control system. Because blood transports both oxygen and carbon dioxide, the heart is divided into separate chambers. This strict division is absolutely crucial because it prevents the oxygen-rich blood coming from the lungs from mixing with the carbon dioxide-rich blood coming back from the body. The right side handles the deoxygenated blood, sending it off to the lungs, while the left side receives the freshly oxygenated blood and pumps it forcefully out to the rest of the body.
This highly efficient setup is called double circulation, and it gets its name because the blood literally goes through the heart twice during each complete cycle, once to the lungs to get oxygenated and once to the rest of the body to deliver it. This ensures a super efficient supply of oxygen, and this is absolutely critical for animals like birds and mammals, including us, because we constantly need a high energy input just to maintain our body temperature.
And hey, let's not forget our autotrophic friends. Plants obviously don't have hearts, but tall trees still need to move water hundreds of feet up into the air. They rely on specialized vascular tissues. The xylem acts like a one-way plumbing system. Think Xylem for water, using physical forces to pull water and essential minerals up from the soil. And remember, the soil is the absolute richest source of raw materials like nitrogen and phosphorus. Meanwhile, the phloem, think phloem for food, is the delivery network, distributing the energy-rich products of photosynthesis from the leaves to every other part of the plant.
Okay, so our factory is fully operational. We are eating, we are breathing, our heart is pumping. But any factory that burns fuel and processes chemicals is naturally going to generate waste. And in a biological system, that waste isn't just useless, it is highly toxic nitrogenous material. If we don't get rid of it, the factory shuts down permanently. So what happens to all this cellular trash?
That brings us to Section 5, Excretion, the cleanup crew.
Excretion is the biological process involved in the removal of these harmful metabolic wastes from the body. It is the ultimate cleanup crew. In humans, our main excretory system revolves around a pair of kidneys located right in the abdomen. As blood passes through the kidneys, it encounters microscopic, highly selective filtration units called nephrons. Nephrons are incredible little structures. They filter out the toxic nitrogenous wastes, stuff like urea and uric acid, from the blood to form urine. But they are smart enough to selectively reabsorb essential things we definitely don't want to lose, like water, glucose, and amino acids. The resulting urine then travels down tubes called ureters and is safely stored in the urinary bladder until it is ready to be released.
Plants, on the other hand, have wildly different but equally fascinating strategies for excretion. I mean, they don't have kidneys. Instead, they might store solid waste in cellular vacuoles. Often, they just pack their waste into leaves, and when the leaf falls off, well, the waste goes right along with it. They can also store waste as resins and gums, especially in older, dead xylem wood. And sometimes they literally just excrete waste directly into the soil surrounding their roots. Pretty smart, right?
And finally, Section 6. Check your understanding.
And there you have it. Nutrition, respiration, transportation, and excretion. The 4 massive pillars of life processes keeping the biological factory running flawlessly. You have mastered these concepts, so now let's confidently do a rapid-fire check of your NCERT questions. Question 1. The kidneys in human beings are a part of the system for what? Excretion. Absolutely. Question 2. The xylem in plants are responsible for transport of water, pulling it straight up from the soil. Question 3. What does the autotrophic mode of nutrition require? Well, it requires all of them: carbon dioxide, water, chlorophyll, and sunlight. And finally, where does the breakdown of pyruvate to give carbon dioxide, water, and energy take place? Since it is producing water and lots of energy, it is the aerobic pathway, so it takes place in the mitochondria. Huge congratulations on crushing Chapter 5. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought. The very next time you feel your heart racing or you take a deep, long breath, just realize that millions of microscopic parts inside you are working perfectly in sync 24/7 just to keep you alive. Are you giving this incredible biological machine the right fuel and care it deserves? Think about it. Keep studying hard, keep asking those great questions, and I will see you in the next explainer.